and welcome to the third episode of Enhancing Trauma Awareness podcast.
So, in today's session, we are going to be talking about racism and that racism is an adverse childhood experience. And we are also going to be talking about the isms that are part of that as well.
So I feel, and it's an invitation to do a check-in. I know when I'm looking at this topic, sensory-wise, things do come up for me. So I'm going to ask all of us to do what you feel is necessary, is comfortable. It could be just taking a few comfortable breaths. It could be shaking it out. I know for me, to be able to get up and kind of shake out my body can help with that excess energy or what may be coming up for me, to really think about your self-care and what's needed in this time together, because it can bring up some things that may be unexpected, and we really do want to promote you taking care of yourself and being very capable of doing that. So please, throughout of our talk today, to do that for yourself, and we'll also be doing a checkout as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Michelle.
All right. So I know for myself, when we talk about racism, and thank you, Cathleen, for saying racism is an adverse childhood experience. Oftentimes when we think about trauma, we haven't always put that and written that down as a trauma, right? A type of trauma. And so even for me, having that being said really does resonate with me, because I know although we have written the curriculum more up to date, that I knew it was always a trauma, right? I identify as an African American, always knew it was a trauma. I remember back in 2014 saying, why don't we have racism written down? And so people just said, because we don't. And I had to accept that, even though in my body, right, I live that. And I'm not going to say in a negative way, right, because trauma is in ways, in a very positive, but that, wait a minute, why aren't we writing this down so that we can talk about this and what this means? So that's just kind of where, when I think about how it started for me, it was a long time ago. So when it was written, I'm like, great, long overdue. And let's really talk about this. And I know it really started in 2020 when the reckoning of George Floyd and all that came, where people started talking about that. Was what I call the tipping point, what many call the tipping point. So, when I'm hearing just racism, I'd love to hear your stories too, of what that resonates for you, what it does in your body, what it looks like when you're hearing like racism as an adverse childhood experience.
I want to go back to what you said about initially in our writings, racism wasn't part of the list of traumas, and so it was a relief to finally see. And as we added other types of traumas as well, I want to acknowledge that. When I think about my journey, my racial journey, if I might say that, I go back to elementary school. And I went to an integrated school. And there's something about, I'm going to say, I didn't necessarily see or feel a race, but there becomes an age when you are in integrated schools that race becomes an issue. And it's like, I'm in this moment now when I know that you are. And again, I went to integrated school, so it was Asians. There weren't a lot of black folks there, but we were some of them, and it was majority white. So it just all of a sudden, okay, I'm recognizing my Blackness. I'm also recognizing and becoming more sensitive to the conversations that are being held, because at that time, it was Martin Luther King, civil rights, all those other kind of things. And so there was a kind of awkwardness in mixed groups, although in my own ethnic groups, there were many discussions. I was fortunate in those discussions were positive discussions, but also understanding that there were many struggles that were going on. So that's part of my racial journey.
Yeah. And mine has been very different. I can say that I grew up with color blindness, right? I was taught not to see color or pretend it didn't exist. And I've been unlearning that for a long time. I think that really jump-started with what Michelle shared about 2020 and George Floyd and the racial reckoning that was happening at that time, and that is continuing to some degree. But that one of the pieces, as we kind of, I was thinking too, Michelle, when you were talking about the journey, there's the personal and there's the professional. Mm-hmm. Like there's been that personal awareness all of your lifetime. And for me, it has been not my whole lifetime. It has been in these last more intense 5 years, even 10 years of trying to think differently and trying to unlearn things. But that there are experiences growing up that I'm now understanding for myself were coming from racism, discrimination, bias in my household. And so I think about the personal, I think about the professional, and how there's been a push, there's been a lot of effort in creating these changes and bringing this this knowledge, this understanding to the light. And I think about, the personal and professional aspects of those, and that when we kind of, as a department, started into the racial literacy kind of training and understanding and trying to come together with that piece, there was the term people of the global majority, right? Mm-hmm. That came up. And that was one of the biggest aha moments for me when I realized that's not me. Like, I've been trained my entire life as a white person to say that's me, right? We are the majority. But when you look at global and what that actually means, that does not include white people. And that was eye-opening to me and has been a major reframe in my life.
Yeah. I think when we're thinking about just language sensitivity, right, even using the word minority, when we're just thinking about even adversely what that means when someone thinks, oh, I am less than. And we know that minority is a word, but what does that mean when you're using that for a specific, when we think of people of color? And so we're like, no, people of the global majority are in the world are just the majority. And that is it. It is a statement. And so that looks a little bit different. And I think that is just a fact. And so when you look at it that way, we're not making anyone less than. It's just a fact. And so that's why we decided with our values, let's say people of the global majority. I think it also goes along with PACEs and ACEs, right? Mm-hmm. We saw the information. It also was being changed in 2020 in the fact that it's not just adverse childhood experiences, it's positive and adverse childhood experiences. And what does that look like in terms of trauma and people being able to build resiliency and what it means when we're talking about children are not born resilient, but made resilient. And I think that gave a power and a hope to this information too. We can understand trauma, but we also can do something about it. And we can have the power with that. So for me, that just was incredible. And why wouldn't we put this in? Mm-hmm. And we talk about language sensitivity, putting our glasses on and being sensitive with that. Well, this became a reckoning, I think, for all of us to say it must be in the curriculum. Mm-hmm. It hasn't, and that's okay. But we're going to, what do they say? When we know better, we do better, right? Maya Angelou. And if we're in the journey of learning again, mm-hmm. we're going to go another inch in this and try to do this together. So that is, for me, just incredible. And so we're all on our personal stories, personal racial literacy journeys, as we can put that. And I know for me, I began another one in 2020. Mm-hmm. And it was tough to really look and see, what does it mean for me in the world that we live in? And how do I have that hope and bring all of those beautiful, positive, right, pieces to also understanding that it is an adverse childhood experience?
You were talking about the word minority, and I know for me, the word minority is a trigger word for me, and I would have a gut response to that because I'm aware of the messages and the things that we're always reading about minority people. And so as we look at the recent research recognizing those positive things for groups of people, it just added balance, if I could say, to that, because that's not what I see. I see positive in my community. And so I would say so often what I see often is discounted, is disrespected. And it's like, do you see what I see? Because there is wealth. There is joy despite all of the troubles, all of those other things. And there's a tricky part. When you talk about some of the traumas of racism, often as a person of color, I must try and say this gently, if I can. I sometimes worry about other people thinking, oh, those poor people, when you share the other side of it, because it wasn't balanced in the beauty. So almost feeling on guard, because if we say this is what's going on, if you don't see things through the lens of resiliency, if you don't see things through the strength in the community, you would feel sorry for folks. And I'm going to say, don't feel sorry for me.
Well, and only hold that space. And I think you're talking about, and we've talked about this a lot, Kathleen. And so when you're thinking about trauma, you're only thinking about the negative. But what has come out of that is being able to hope piece of saying, this is my story, and look where I am. This is the strength. This is positive things have come out of this. And we want you to see that, because the resiliency and the love and the joy, all of that is intertwined. And I think that's what you're really wanting to stress, because people can be like, oh, and it's like, no, there is beautiful things in this. We want you to understand, but we also want you to not separate that. It is joy and pain, all that can coexist for everyone.
Yeah.
For everyone. And
Yeah.
it does. And it does. Yeah.
When you talk about that, I hear the trauma in racism, yes, but there's life in being a person of the global majority. Like there's just life. There's all of it, the ups, the downs, the ins, the outs. Appreciate that perspective.
I think what would be nice to even hear is how we all have embarked on our racial literacy journey. And I'm thinking professionally, because we're all in here professionally. Yes, we have our personal stories as well. But thinking about that, especially when we're talking about we change the curriculum and put that in. So I know I would love to hear even more detail on our journeys. And so people can resonate and kind of think about what their own journey has been as well.
Yeah. And I mean, I can share as, from the white person perspective of what I've experienced in this is, professionally, I saw the push and pull for a while in this needs to be included. This is trauma. This is information that needs to be presented if we're talking about trauma, and the just kind of blankness on the other side of that, right? There was no real response. It just never happened until this kind of evolution that we're talking about. And I know for myself in the professional space, I started into trainings, and one of the first ones I took was white people confronting racism, because I was like, that's what I want to do. Right? I want to do this different. I don't want to pretend I'm colorblind. I want to have language. I want to figure out how to do this differently and show up differently. And so that was one of the first pieces for me, even before, like, as a department, we went into kind of racial literacy training. And that was an important step, because I feel it very valuable together with white folks who are committed to doing things differently, committed to looking at racism, to looking at our own parts in it, and doing something differently. And so that was an important step for me in that piece.
I had mentioned before about in 2020 looking at things a lot differently, and I know the pandemic, we were home. So for me, I took a lot of classes. I was on Zoom a lot and was able to experience settings in which it were just people of the global majority, and also settings in which people were integrated together, and a lot of work being done. And so that was helpful for me, because I needed to do it apart from work to really look at what was going on for myself. And so many, 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 many of those kinds of classes, and then also being able to talk to people and then bringing that to work. And I know also, SaraLiz, we, as someone who identifies as white and someone who identifies as person of the global majority, really talking about real things and bringing your authentic self. And that became part of the work as well as Cathleen. We've had our conversations of just doing that together, and then us coming together. So I think that's been a lot of work, and still we do that in terms of even understanding paces and building on that and continuing to have these constructive conversations. I almost forgot, we literally did one for everyone. Kathleen, I don't know if you remember, we did was it constructive conversations? And I almost forgot about that. Whew, yeah, that was a lot, and also part of our learning experience of what to do and what not to. Putting a different kind of trauma lenses on to figure that out.
Oh, I remember that list as you were talking. That I wonder very few agencies might have had that list and had that authentic discussion that we had. So I certainly remember. I remember that list that we compiled, and I think it was an excellent tool, and it opened up conversations that we hadn't had, and it was like what I'm really thinking, what I really see, and how we really can handle it. And if I could say, I don't think you know what you're talking about. Let's hear the other side of this. And of course, sometimes there's a backlash because, no, you've been talking all the time. Now I'm going to talk. And now you're going to listen to me. And now we're going to write this thing down. And now it might get a little tense, but we all need to grow. Yeah. So all of us. So
I think such a big piece of my unlearning has been, and I'm always a listener, but like just to listen, like listen to other voices, and not all white voices. Like that was a big learning curve for me. And then the next step, like it was reading books, it was taking in all the information. The next step was then to speak, which is a much harder part for me, as you can both attest to, right? And we had, I think when Michelle and I had spent a lot of time working on a curriculum, and then we taught it, and it was like, my motto was like, I'm going to show up shaking. Like my voice might shake while I try to stand up and say the things I need to say, but I'm going to say them.
We literally said we were going to have hats that said, I'm going to be here and I'm shaking. Like I'm going to show up shaking, and it's going to be okay. And we're going to show that vulnerability of working together and what that looks like. Yeah.
So mentioned a couple of times this kind of racial literacy journey that we've been on as a department, and as leaders in that department. And so just kind of thinking maybe we can reflect a little bit on what our main takeaways or even stories that we have from that experience.
I can say for myself, that one of the takeaways that I came from doing one of our racial literacy workshops was to be my authentic self. And the question that I was asked was, have you ever been your authentic self in the professional setting? And I said no. And then I was asked to be my authentic self. And I did. And it felt so bleeping good. And it was so refreshing, and to realize that I was and have been giving people what they need to be comfortable in my space, and that I didn't need to do that. And so I've been working on that ever since. And so, that is my biggest takeaway, and something I'm still working on.
And mine, these were words of wisdom. And as I discussed relationships and racism, the words that I received, the wisdom, my takeaway was when I was told it's okay to go it alone. And as you do research and you present different things that are based on knowledge and information, sometimes folks will fight against it. I would prefer that people go with me. But the words of wisdom was, sometimes you gotta go it by yourself. And I recognize in my life there have been times I've had to fight, but I did it. I did it on my own, and I moved forward, and it worked out. Sometimes you gotta do it by yourself.
Can I get an amen?
What I can say is I'm just learning to get uncomfortable. I have to lean into discomfort. And honestly, I can choose to. I have that choice, and that in and of itself is just mind-blowing. But I have the choice, and I choose to continually get uncomfortable and have the conversations that are hard and show up shaking. Even in here, we've talked, we've had conversations, and it's still hard, and I'm still going to keep showing up.
I'm going to take a nice breath and kind of do a checkout in terms of just noticing what may be going on for you in your body. Throughout our talk, I've noticed just many different things and the release that I need. So please do what you need. I'm going to actually take a nice inhale and So if you like to do it with me, I'm going to take another inhale. And kind of just shake out what needs to be shooken out.
Thanks. I was thinking about, as we were going through this, kind of what a call to action might be. And I guess for my part, I want to, I don't know how to word it, but I just want to invite folks into the discomfort of these conversations, even if it's listening to this again and seeing what pops out again. Maybe it's looking for a couple resources, a book to read that could help you personally and professionally just show up differently in conversations when we're thinking about adverse childhood experiences and racism. Just maybe think about how we can do the inner work so that it makes a shift for the outer ripples that come forward from that.
Thank you.
For our greater good.
I'm just going to add one note for people of the global majority. Fill the room.
Yes.
Fill the room.
Please. Yes, please.